PRSA New York hosted an event featuring Rebecca Blumenstein, the deputy managing editor of the New York Times. Doug Simon, CEO at DS Simon Media, moderated the event. In this section, Rebecca discusses content areas that may start gaining more coverage over the next few years.
What I'd like to hear is what are some of the big stories that you think will come up in the next year or two that will be a larger focus that might not be at the top of people's process right now? Like there's big stuff percolating, like, hey, if you've got someone related to these areas, you need to be thinking about that. What are some of the big stories that are not yet, what you see every day?
I think AI and the changing nature of work is, that may not sound like a very original thought, but it feels like it's gaining momentum, and what that means, it might not. I think we badly need to move beyond like no jobs will be lost and all jobs will be lost debate. And there are some really cool things you can do. There's also probably like more white collar workers who will be displaced than blue collar workers. I think US-China is just a massive story. There's basically a Cold War going on. The internet is breaking into two. And there are big implications for companies that are being affected by tariffs. People who, Chinese investment has been important here. Just the implications of we've all kind of worked in this world where globalization was really at this, this kind of assumption.
You had the China Bureau at the time.
Yes, yeah, and there was like at that point, how many McDonald's can you open? How quickly can you open? Just like how quickly can you expand? And I think that, depending on what happens this week with the trade agreement and the tariffs, there's just a fundamental rethinking of the U.S.-China relationship, and it is deep, and it's upsetting to a lot of us who kind of have believed that it can be mutually beneficial for both sides, but I'm just not sure that, I'm not sure that's where the countries are going. And this whole case against Huawei is a very big and tough situation because...
Do you want to maybe explain that a little bit for those who aren't up to speed on it?
Huawei is this telecom equipment company in China that is a juggernaut. I've never seen a big company grow so fast. It made equipment for wireless and all sorts of communications for a long time, and then just I think 5 years ago got into cell phones and has quickly become one of the biggest cell phone makers. You don't see them as much here, but they make a lot of phones. They also make very high-end phones, and they did very smart things. They established an exclusive partnership with Leica, for example, and they have 2 Leica cameras on their high-end phones. You don't see their phones that much because the U.S. basically has banned their sale through AT&T and Verizon, and that kind of started this tension. And what's happening in the world now is that the U.S. has accused Huawei. They arrested the daughter of the founder and accused Huawei of violating sanctions on Iran. And it's become, and you've all heard of 5G, right? So this is all important because the world is going to 5G, and countries around the world need to decide who they're buying their equipment from. And the United States, Pompeo today, was just in Europe warning the Europeans, don't buy Huawei, or we're gonna retaliate against you. And there's spying concerns and surveillance concerns. Some think they're founded, some think they're not. But these are huge
and there are also
trends.
Concerns that they got funding from the government.
There's been feelings that the founder who served in the military is tied to the government, and anybody who, and so this is like the U.S. tech industry v. China. And by the way, we may think we're advanced here. How many of you have been to China and seen the way they communicate? It is like much more advanced than anything. You don't even use cash now in China, and mobile payments, and just we have separate apps for everything, and they have it all in WeChat. And so it's, I don't know. I think the rise of China and how this plays out here is probably one of the biggest stories of our time. Obviously, the 2020 election and how the country's feeling. I'm from Michigan. We were talking. I was just there in Detroit. I think how the country feels is we have to be careful on the coast that we don't kind of assume that we know what's happening in the country and what people care about, and that's where you probably all have a really interesting, vantage point. Those are just a few things that strike me.
Cool. Very interesting thing that was recently involved in the opinion page, and you talked about Facebook earlier and how views are changing about companies that were like, every one of you guys who have been like, I want to work at Facebook, that's super cool. Now it's like, I don't know, I'm not really comfortable with some things they're doing, but the Times has embarked on a whole privacy project, and also including some self-examination in that area. What's your take on that? Maybe you can share some of that.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned tech, and the techlash, I guess people are calling it, is one of the biggest things out there. Look, this isn't exactly, an original topic. It's not like we're discovering the issue of privacy, but it has become a real, a moment of crisis in many ways, and one where, California has passed a pretty expansive privacy law, and whether or not the U.S. follows is, whether that's adopted throughout the country. Yes, yes, and because Europe has already adopted a very strict one, but I mean, let's face it, there have been fundamental questions raised about Facebook and Google and how they profit off of the data that they collect almost constantly from consumers. Amazon, the backlash here in New York against Amazon was unbelievable to watch. They have an incredible amount of power in the economy, and I think people, should you have an Alexa in your house is a fundamental. I debate it with my husband all the time, and we don't at this point. So these
people have been telling me, and you would have insight into that they'll be talking about something, and then they'll go on their computer or iPad, and there'll be an ad relative to what they were actually talking about, which is sort of weirding them out.
So
it's not just through Alexa either.
No, your phone can be a recording device as well. So I think there's been a collective, and at the Times we just said, oh my gosh, we just have to mount a concerted effort to, get the best writers, to do deep investigative stories, to really try to figure out like what, the data economy, and to survey the landscape of different opinions about, what needs to change. Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, wrote a piece today. The tech companies are, they've been announcing a lot of measures to try to kind of clean up their act, but there are some fundamental questions as to whether or not they really can, given their current business model, which is based on selling, advertising.
Skeptics might say that they're just trying to turn down the heat.
That's right, of course. And so I think the questions are just beginning, and this has been we still, quite frankly, don't know exactly what happened in the 2016 election. And the tech giants have been less than forthcoming about that. So and the 2020 is coming. Misinformation is a bigger problem than ever before. We had the New Zealand shooting which was broadcast live on Facebook, very distressingly, and you can go on and on and on. So I think that people are really questioning the power of these tech companies and what can and should be done about them, and privacy is one part of it. I will add that the jury's out. Like, it's not. We don't disclose traffic, but I would say that it's not clear that people care about privacy. It's not like this. We're some stories we publish and it's like off the charts, like millions of page views. These are doing fine, but you don't really get a sense, and I'm eager to hear from you folks, that people, there's a sense that Americans don't really care about privacy.
So maybe a quick question to you, show of hands. Have you modified any of your own behaviors because of privacy concerns? Okay, cool. That's